got a full agenda, so are we okay to get started here?
Ready?
Ready.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. I see you pressed record, and I assume we will have some viewers this evening too. So, all right.
All right. Well, if you're all ready, mics are hot. Going live in 3, 2, 1.
All right. I'm going to call this special open and executive work session to order on June 30th. Good evening, everybody. Can I have a motion for an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Brandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. As we typically do, this is primarily about approving our FY 20 current budget expenditures and projecting into 2021. So Chris Holzer, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Okay, good evening, everybody. So we'll start off this evening's event with our final budget amendment for fiscal year 20, which is today is the last day of fiscal year 20. So the purpose of this amendment is to bring our revenues to actual so that we have an accurate year by year look. So broad strokes here on the revenue side, we have decreased our revenue budgets by $2,000. We have decreased our expenditures by $8,860. All in all, that results in an ending fund balance as a percentage of expenditures of 42.15% for fiscal year 20. So we go in just a little bit deeper. We've reduced our revenue on the debt service side by $105,000. That is due to local revenue, primarily taxes and a little bit of federal there. Those things track by along with the local taxes. Increased a little bit here on the bond issue, which is interest. Nothing to get excited about there. And then when we look at all the funds, all in all, revenues have decreased $106,911. Expenditures have decreased $18,346. All in all, the budget has decreased to $88,565. And again, for the most part, local revenues, we're adjusting those down to bring taxes to actual. And we also had budgeted for some donations that we were not able to get into this fiscal year. We'll probably get those in the mail tomorrow. So that's how those things typically work. We've increased our state revenue slightly to account for basic formula money from the state, and with slight increases in the federal revenue due to the CARES Act funds. We were able to take one small drawdown on that related to technology expenses in preparation for fiscal year 21. This is the line item detail. First column is the budget that we're adjusting. The middle column here is brackets as a reduction, not brackets as an increase. And the net change is on this third column. So again, these changes result in an ending fund balance of 42.15%. Are there any questions?
Pretty straightforward. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that you've been making those adjustments throughout the fiscal year too to keep us aligned with both our savings and our adjustments in revenue too.
You're quite welcome. It does give us a little bit better opportunity to make spending adjustments over the course of the year as the trajectory of revenues changes. I'm going to share my screen this time, which I apologize to our guests that I did not do on that last one. So you should be looking at it now. So things have changed a little bit since the last time we met. Not so much here on the revenue side. We did tune down some of the state revenues as we get better information from the state, and we just received another administrative memo today that I'll briefly go over with you in a moment. But for all intents and purposes, you have seen this revenue side. We did reduce some of our non-current revenue. That's related to some local revenues that we had anticipated that we essentially cut in half just due to timing. And the positions, again, is relatively the same. No, it's not relatively the same. It is the same. Salaries, again, 6% increase of salaries across the board and a 5% increase to benefits. We added just a little caveat here. This number is a little skewed just due to a 29% decrease in our workers' comp insurance. So less workers' comp claims means less workers' comp insurance premiums. So we've been pretty good on the workers' comp side. So again, with that large decrease, it skewed our total benefits expenses because that's where those expenses are coded. Purchase service and supplies, like we talked a couple weeks ago, those are moving targets as we're adjusting for COVID-related expenses. That did happen again. So we are at a 28% increase in purchase service, and we are at a 305 increase in supplies. Again, once COVID started, these were expenses that we could have just anticipated. My hope is that things will taper off and we won't have to dig into those as deep, as a lot of that is contingency for things that are unknown.
Chris, just real quick, you said it's a $305,000 increase.
Yes.
Supplies, not a 305% increase in supplies.
Oh, did I really? Oh my goodness.
That's okay. 16% increase in supplies.
16% increase. Thanks for that catch.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Lots to cover. I just wanted to make that point.
Oh, I appreciate that. Capital outlay, we discussed that, moving those into bond projects. Debt service, again, debt service, it's funded, so it's restricted funds only for the purposes of paying bonded indebtedness, principal and interest. So the payment next year will be $3.6 million. And here again, I've updated the COVID-related expenses, primarily due to nursing. We were able to, from our Director of Student Services, Mr. Estrada, we were able to get some updated numbers from him related to PPE supplies. The greatest increase here is the anticipation of needing to bring on essentially a permanent temporary staff nurse to help assist our 3 nurses in our district that we have currently as employees. And we felt that this was the most economical way to go rather than bringing a full FTE on. So this will probably, Vince will probably be bringing this person on, and I'm sure he'll go through a process to find the right type of person that will fit in at MRH, because they will be here for quite a while.
And Chris, excuse me for a second, in regards to the CARES Act, there is some support with that. You might want to reiterate what we can offset, what we've received so far.
Yeah, so what we're anticipating receiving right now is somewhere between 95 and 110,000, somewhere around there. We've already drawn down just a little bit of that this year, as I mentioned earlier, but we have budgeted for those expenses. I mean, that's a good number. So roughly, we'll be able to offset about $100,000 in expenses. I have applied for a grant through the county. I'll be applying for another one through the county prior to the 14th. They've moved the deadline, which is great. Gives me a little bit more time to work on it. But
oh, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
But those 2 grants are related to childcare funding to maintain our licensing requirements as a result of sanitation, disinfecting, PPE, additional things related to food service, and any disruption of business costs. So we do have some of those. So we'll be asking for those. It's no guarantee that we'll get them. There's a lot of small home-based childcare facilities that are also submitting for those very same grants. And I don't necessarily care to be greedy, but I will submit for those grants. But I would anticipate preferential, those would probably be a little bit higher on the priority list, because we do need to keep those smaller childcare facilities up and running. And I think this county understands that. Everything here on the expenditure side is relatively the same. We did adjust a few things, mostly related to COVID. You will see here that I'm going to bring this up just a little bit here. We were showing a surplus last time we met. I told you that that likely would change. It did. We're right now showing a deficit of $125,000. And again, as I've been talking for the last few months, this is not a concern to me at this point. One of the benefits to our fiscal practices has been our ability to build a significant cash reserve for things such as this. So I feel like we'll be able to absorb this without too much difficulty. And that would take the fund balance, operating fund balance, down slightly from 42% to 38%.
This will be a highly unusual year. So some
Yes.
expenses will.
I was really bummed when I saw it go into the deficit, but I do understand that there's a reality out there that we're dealing with right now. So again, MRH finances are very strong, and I'm confident that we'll be able to weather this storm. So as we go through here, including debt service, we will also be able to show a surplus overall, all funds of 1.3. But again, debt service is restricted funds, so there's no possibility of using that surplus for anything other than principal and interest payments. So again, here's just a look at all of the funds with a bit of a projection here. So here's a good spot to pause briefly and share with you the administrative memo that Desi just released today. Here it is. I'm sure that some probably in our audience and some of you board members have potentially seen this already. It was just released earlier today. It's a little misleading, so I wanted to explain that. They talk about the foundation formula having a reduction of $123.3 million. That is exactly the same number that they gave us in June. So what they're telling us here is, what they told us June 1st is that our June payment from the state would be reduced, and it was. I've told you that also, since we only receive anywhere from 8 to 10% of our funding is from the state, we're somewhat insulated to those types of variances. So I wasn't all that concerned about that. So when I saw this one today, I was immediately concerned. However, caveat here, it's the very same number. So what they're telling me is that I should expect a reduction in also our July payment, which we anticipated. So really, this isn't new information. It's just restating old information. And one additional thing that they've added is a reduction to $1 million reduction to parents as teachers funding. But again, to put that in perspective, any family that isn't able to take part in parents as teachers is a big deal. However, 375 high-need families and 400 non-high-need families will not participate in family personal visits in the coming academic year. So that's 775 families. In the broader context of the county, of the state, that's a relatively small number, but that shouldn't diminish the importance of that number, just to put it in perspective. So I'm not yet sure what the impact on MRH families would be in that regard. So that'll be something that we'll probably need to talk about in the coming months as we understand as we get more information from the state on what this means. They're also telling me that they're going to adjust our student adequacy target, which again, we anticipated, and on the conservative side, we even lowered it just a little bit more on our budgeting for this next year. So again, these numbers aren't all that alarming to me. If I had one suggestion to the state is that perhaps they clarify some of those historical things that go into this so that it's not so alarming to folks. So again, I do expect the target to continue to move on the revenue side, especially from the state. So as those changes come down the pipe, we will certainly keep you, the board, abreast of those and make sure that we're correcting our revenue and adjusting our expenditures in kind. So our next steps are to ask you, the board, to approve the fiscal 21 budget so that tomorrow on July 1, we can hit the ground running. And then tomorrow, fire up fiscal year 21. Any additional questions?
Chris, I think this is a good job. I appreciate that. And the reporting and the way you're handling this. My question for fiscal year 21 with the Alio system in place, how easy is it to disaggregate specific spending across different accounting lines that are COVID related expenses? I know you've pulled those out as estimates there, but I'm thinking specifically of like staffing costs and other additional expenditures that would go into sort of a staffing line, but you know, would make maybe commingle with a larger number. You know, is it easy for you to pull, or your staff to pull, you know, that out of Alio and out of the budget so that we can have kind of ongoing conversations about the expenditures that are COVID related that we're incurring?
Yes, there's a couple ways that we'll be able to track that. Number one is for any of those expenditures that we're able to offset with CARES Act funding or the ESSER funds, DESI's provided us with a set of account codes specifically for that purpose. So much like we have our title funds, all of our federal accounting, or excuse me, all of our federal revenues and expenditures go through a set of accounts. So we've created those accounts both on the revenue and the expenditure side. As those expenditures occur, we'll move them over into those particular federal accounts, but there will be expenditures that will happen outside of that funding. That funding will be exhausted relatively quick. So we've already talked about internally here. We'll set up one of the dimensions within our account codes that we will be able to easily disaggregate those expenses. And as I'm talking about it, it seems like perhaps what we could add to the financial statements each month, if just in narrative form, to keep that running total of what those COVID expenses are. That sound reasonable?
Yeah, that would be helpful, I think, for us to see that, and even in just a narrative form would be helpful.
Yeah.
And then just kind of as a follow-up, I mean, with the other additional reporting mechanisms in place for CARES Act and everything else, are you guys okay handling all the additional reporting you have to do in terms of any of that funding?
Yes, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Honestly, we're well used to doing it on the title side. So this is really just another set of accounts for us. And for the most part, we've already identified and targeted that set of expenditures that we're going to allocate those funds to. So it shouldn't be a problem at all. The ones that will be a little bit more difficult, but certainly manageable if we were to receive any of those county grants. One of the ways, the mechanism through which those are delivered is they give you the money monthly and you give them back what you don't spend. So again, that's a reasonable request, and it's a perfectly fine mechanism. That is a little different than what we've experienced before. So if we're blessed enough to receive those grant funds, we'll certainly be able to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, one additional thing. On the budgeting side, anything that was COVID related, because of our, I guess our very discrete way that we budget line items, we've been able to identify COVID expenses on the line item budget for the expenses. So as I was adding, let's take Vince and student services, as I was adding those things to the nurse's budget on his behalf, COVID related is the first tagline on that line item, so that we're able to find those, and that the secretaries and whoever's in charge of spending from those budgets are able to easily identify what those funds were allocated for, so they don't spend them on something else. So.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to have both these items show up in action items this evening. So if you think of another question between now and then, we'll have the chance. Great. We'll move on then to a study item for this evening. Obviously, we've been discussing a lot of possibilities about how school is going to look different in the fall. And Francis and Nikki and I participated last week listening session with a large number of community members through Zoom. And certainly there were some questions that we couldn't yet answer around some of the changes that need to happen at the Early Childhood Center. So for the sake of transparency and making some decisions that have domino effects as quickly as makes sense, have Dr. H here tonight, off of vacation. Sorry to do that, but thank you for being here this evening to talk about a recommendation from your team.
Okay. Good evening. I hope all of you are well. I don't have a formal presentation, but I did early on make the recommendation that we suspend our First Friends program for the coming school year in order to create additional space so that we could spread out our preschool program, the 3 to 5 year old program. Our First Friends program is a very important program, but it is our young 2-year-olds and our young 3-year-olds who are not toilet trained. They come either 2 half days on Tuesday, Thursday, or they come Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's a 3-hour program. And the parents that partake in that program, they have their students there to gain their first social experience. It doesn't tend to be a program the parents rely on so that they can work, given the short hours of it. We were also concerned about the very close contact that the teachers would have with the students in terms of toileting and the need to hold them very closely, because when 2-year-olds come to school, it often requires a lot of carrying and holding and so forth. So we felt that the best recommendation would be to suspend that program. By suspending that program, we would make Katie Nauman a full-day teacher. We would take 3 children out of each of the existing home spaces. And I want to clarify, not returning students. They would all return to their home spaces. But we have enough new students in each of the home spaces that we could create another full-day classroom, thereby creating more space within each of the home spaces. The current teacher for the First Friends program would move to our half-day preschool program, which is 2 half days, 3 half days, or 5 half days. Becky Hibbets, who is the First Friends teacher, would become that teacher. And one thing that I would say that is a positive about doing that is most of all of the new students that are moving into our half-day preschool program are from First Friends. So there would be a strong level of continuity for the teaching staff for those new students. Let's see. Also, the First Friends families that would not be able to participate in the program this year, they would be able to enroll next year with returning students. They would not have to go to the new preschool registration. And I think that's probably an important point for those families. I would also be willing to contact those families personally and speak with them. Currently, we have 20 families enrolled in that program. Typically, it has the capacity for 32. The reason why we held down the enrollment in that program is there are also students who are 2 that come to us in the First Friends program from First Steps. And if you're not familiar, First Steps is the program in the state of Missouri that provides special ed services to children birth to 3. So we knew that we were going to have 3 students who had higher needs actually in our Monday, Wednesday, Friday program. And so our Tuesday, Thursday program, we held the enrollment down, and our extra 3rd teacher, which in the past has been Joanne Ford, would have moved to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday program to support those students. So we kept the enrollment low on Tuesday and Thursday so the 2 teachers could handle that. For those friends in the children in First Friends, we are also working with our parents as teachers, educators, to find ways that we can support those families in the absence of the program, particularly those children that may have higher needs. And if the board does approve this recommendation, then we would reach out to those families and determine how could we help them best. So we certainly aren't just ignoring those families. We want to find a way that we can serve them through our Parents as Teachers program or other innovative ideas. What other questions might you have? Those are the main points that I wanted to share, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about that recommendation.
I think you were pretty proactive in hitting the high points there, Dr. Hebenstreit, even without a presentation and from technically being on vacation, right?
It's okay. It's all good. I would say that the classroom, our intention is the classroom that is the First Friends program, that would become Katie Nauman's classroom. And her current classroom, what would happen is she is in the new wing where there are 3 home spaces. So what would happen is the classroom that's in the middle, which is our Team Talk classroom that has, they're all our students, 10 have IEPs, between 6 to 7 have IEPs. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. 10 children do not have IEPs, and then the other 6 or 7 would. We're going to move that to where Katie Nauman is, and that's creating an extra home space. So the home space 9, which is currently Mr. Scott's, and then Stacy and Ashley's home space would have an additional home space to create, more room for their 2 classrooms. And then the half-day preschool program would go into the cottage, which ultimately next year the plan would be to have First Friends in that space.
All right. I think this recommendation was important to hear tonight, and we have it on action items as well, so that as was stated, there would be opportunity for staff to do the personal outreach to families who had previously enrolled and who may be not on the call tonight hearing about potential plans for changes to the program. So unless there are questions, we will move on.
Thank you, Dr. Hebenstreit.
Thank you, Cindy.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, I have to pull up my agenda again here. Great. So moving into admin communication, I wanted to give Karen an opportunity just to give us an update on a couple of high-level items as we're preparing for a regular school board meeting in a couple of weeks, and all the planning that's happening behind the scenes, specifically some high-level items on the survey results. So go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Good evening, everyone. So yes, I'm going to be very brief. I want to thank everyone for participating in our stakeholder survey. We had a vigorous response from our community. We had over 700 people respond, and we had over 200 written responses. So we have very rich data that's going to help drive all of our professional development. So we are in the beginning stages of administrators diving into the analysis. And for your awareness, Roxana will give you a very high level, and we're stressing high level because the task force sat through 2 hours of the initial analysis of the data, and that was high level with that. So we have a lot of rich data, but you will not experience that. And Roxana and I talked, and you will receive the presentation and some explanation of what you will see via email, and then she'll make reference to it at the board meeting on July 16th. So you'll have some time to look at that. But I just want to make sure that it's very appreciative of everyone taking the time, and especially from families taking the time to respond to the text boxes when they were able to give essay responses. It really helped. And we had quite a few students on the elementary level respond, which we were pleasantly surprised. And we could really tell they've learned how to respond to a prompt. It was very well done. I might have said, real life application done well. So with that being said, more to come, and we're using it right away. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I did sit in on the 2-hour presentation of the richness of the data. I think one of the, really important key points is that Roxana had already been able to disaggregate by building and had shared, parent, student, and staff data with the administrative teams in each building. So I think we recognize there are some slightly different considerations and perceptions and feelings of the staff and the students and the parents at each building. And so Karen and I had discussed that there will be an expectation, there is an expectation that administrators and other folks setting plans in buildings are being informed by that data, as well as obviously by the expert information we're getting from health professionals and others as we're making decisions here. So that is a good thing to be aware of. Any questions or anything folks want to make sure that we hear about when Roxana presents on the 16th?
Katie, I think you muted yourself accidentally.
Oh, sorry, I have a bouncing baby here. And if there's any questions or things folks want to make sure they hear from Roxana on the 16th, feel free to speak it now or send
an email.
Yeah, send an email. Alrighty then, we'll move on. The bullet point is also about some equity work. There's a couple of things in this document. We will be spending our work session in July digging deeper into most of the equity conversation, but did want to pull out the idea that's contained in this document that Karen presented on opportunity to hear more fully from students. And so while there's other things in here, that's really what I asked Karen to share some thoughts about tonight. And hopefully we can make some decisions this evening to facilitate some conversations with our brilliant students in the coming month or two. So go ahead, Karen.
Yes, thank you so much. So, board, you have seen this for the second time. I presented this to you, as Katie had mentioned. In the beginning of the document, I just extracted from the recent educational equity policy, just as a refresh and context. And so below that are 3 goals that I was hoping to accomplish this year before exiting. And the first 2, I really want to speak to. One in particular is Katie was talking about right now, knowing everything that has been going on with the school closure and then all of the civil unrest that we've had recently. I just feel it's important to have conversation with our students to let them know that leadership cares about their experiences and just to create a safe environment for that dialogue. I call it a town hall. You could also consider it like a focus group facilitated by administration. And as I said here, it's a proposal. If you are interested in moving forward and being a part of that conversation, or if you wanted to facilitate that, really kind of leaving it open. But I just feel right now, especially with this age group, to know like just where they are. And both of these events have been very, it's intense for them, and just how they have navigated what is life like and what can we do for them in returns to their re-entry. So just to kind of leave it open for discussion, any feedback on that, any interest. Again, it's up to you if you want that to be sponsored or you want it the high school to be sponsored. It could go either way, or you don't want to do it at all. I just wanted to just put it out there for you all to decide.
I think you have a little bit more fleshed out than that, at least in your mind, Karen, because I mean, there would also be some urgency with doing something like
Yeah,
this.
I really do.
Yeah. So go ahead and speak further to, kind of what the ideal is. We can obviously press on that, or, offer up some amendments if necessary. But I think.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So yeah, I would like to move forward with this. I would like to do it before school starts. And I can see, because things are so virtual, it probably would be easier to get a hold of kids to sit in on conversations around this. And we need more data, in my opinion, and we also need to offer support to our students to have voice and to know that we support their voice and their thoughts about what's going on. And I really want to know how they feel about reentry and any concerns that they have. And then also the whole issue of what's going on as a response to what's been going on with all of the marches and the protesting and the social activism, and how we can support them and their voice, or if they have any concerns with that. So yes, that's really, I feel there is a certain sense of urgency to reach out to our young people right now and not to delay it. And I feel it's important for the adults to know that we support what they have on their mind, if they have any ideas or if they have any concerns. I think it's important for us to reach out to them versus us waiting on them to reach out to us.
I support that. I think it's a really good idea. I'd like to hear from our students. I think that it's hard to miss that a lot of the protests that we're seeing have been led by young people. So I would love to hear from our students. I think it's a wonderful idea.
I agree.
I would agree also. So many of our young people are participating in all these marches now, and it'd just be interesting just to get their views and opinions about what are they feeling right now. So I feel like this is a good thing that we should do.
And it's nice to invite them to have an active voice, within our schools and within our community, to invite them to the table to tell us, if you are participating in marches, there are demands behind that. You're not just going out to take a walk, you're going out to, make demand and to make change. And so if they see something that we're missing, it would be nice to hear that, or just to hear from their perspective. We might be looking at the same thing, but differently. So yeah, absolutely.
Karen, how do you imagine this might be facilitated in a way that makes sense? I mean, I acknowledge that, I don't know very many high school students. I wouldn't expect them to be, quick to open up to the board necessarily, although I recognize many of you on the Zoom have personal relationships with current high schoolers or recently graduated high schoolers. So, yeah, what would be your recommendation there?
As a participant, more so than a facilitator. But I'd leave it open if you all felt strongly about that, or a comfort level. But my recommendation is to be a participant.
And that, like, Dr. Grauer and his team would facilitate, or?
Yeah, and my other thought, because we're going to be partnering closely with NCCJ this year, both middle school and high school, just because, one, I have a relationship with them, and then they're going to be in the school, quite a bit this year anyway. So depending on how administration feels, I also would reach out to them as an option. So either or, in order to facilitate the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the possibilities here. I think it would be great to get a couple of these on the calendar, like you said, before August 24th. I think as you and I spoke earlier, probably a couple of sessions targeting both high school and middle school. And we've even had our elementary students actors on TV and things like that, right? So we could probably go even to our younger students.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well, but I didn't want to be greedy. But I think that school and the kids and the conversations that they've had with their teachers, that they're ready for that. So I have not started any of the planning because yet I didn't want to be presumptuous, and I just wanted to get a feel for your participation. Well, one, your approval, and also your participation. There are no dates yet. That would be next, moving forward with this.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy 8 weeks in front of us, but this is
it is what it is.
Yep.
Our new normal.
All right.
So I can move forward with that, and I'll keep you posted on dates and all that good stuff. Okay. Can I just real quick, this other one, this is something that I've wanted to do for years, is have a place for families, teachers to go to a place, a repository, a resource, all the things that we're doing on our webpage. And there's so much going on, and many are really hungry for more information. And also, I think we need to organize what we've done with our conceptual models, or if we have a town hall or any other things that we've been doing, like with the policy or any other type of community engagement pieces around educational equity, really to update what we have and deconstruct and rebuild our spaces on the website so it can be a vibrant place and we can really drive people to these spaces. So I've had a conversation with Ed, and it seems like the stars are aligning now for some deep work around the webpage. And Ed, you want to kind of take it from there?
Yeah, we're moving pretty swiftly on this. Already this week, and it's only Tuesday, our website architect has created a banner. And what we're going to do is, rather than just add another title on a bar, we're going to do with this initiative what we did with Proposition E. That is, when you go to the website, whether it's your desktop or your mobile device, you're going to see a banner first thing. And it's going to be titled whatever we decide it's going to be titled. But you can click on it right then. And it'll be far more prominent, like I said, than any title that's on a bar with one-word messages. And then that will take you to a hopefully robustly populated, multi-tiered page with, like you said, the family resources and even current events. Things you can do, resources to take advantage of. I was thinking current academic articles on equity and education. There's a million possibilities. But we're already down the road, and we're going to talk tomorrow about how to structure this.
So more to come with that one, but I really want this to be a hot spot for families, and even for you all when you're out and about, you can just drive people to that space and they can see what's going on and updated resources. So it's in development.
I'm sorry. Is it possible to include like the training that the board has been through? I think lot of community members don't know we've been through equity training as well, and we keep doing that training, and we ask for more. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So we're on the same wavelength because we're in this. It's a high level partnership that we have with the MAP Center, and we have access to so many resources. And then also, like Katie, you wanted us to push out this one webinar that they had. And I know some families actually took advantage of that. So I want to be able to have those things posted. Those activities, board activity and trainings, all of this stuff I want to have spotlighted. What you've done, what we're about, and where you can find resources. So that's up and coming now that we're developing.
Yeah,
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties back to the conversations we've had here about just acknowledging the milestones that have been, you know, part of the journey, even going back 20 years now, right? With the original approval of the metaphors, right? And has continued to evolve into our work today. So yeah.
Oh, you're
that will be great to have a repository for that information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So goal 3, I'm not going to talk about. That can come later, but I just want you to know I have another idea.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, we're going to spend our work session in a week digging into some of the equity pieces. So great. We'll move on then. Oh, great. Yeah, the final piece here just slides right into that. Recognize that there's a lot of communication pieces happening, have been happening, will be happening. Wanted to just make sure we created some space for updates from Ed and Karen, as far as, you know, thoughts on how things are rolling out here and any shaping or reactions that, you know, we're hearing too. So Ed, I'll let you provide a couple of updates here on things that you've been pushing out or preparing to push out, and then might just enter the end about the listening session that we had last week.
Sure. I have kind of a week by week blueprint for the month of July that I'll break down right now into basically 4 different topic areas. Not that there are only 4 topics. So on the subject of reentry communications, this week that we're in now, my job is to basically compile, and Roxanne has already done that for the most part, but compile and summarize and release a really high level results of the family and staff survey. This is going to be a very easy to digest thing for families because, you know, they were the ones who took the time to do it, and we promised them that we would have some information. So I'm not going to, you know, release the entire raw data, but they deserve to know some of the highlights of it. I'll be distributing information about summer athletics protocol, and I want to elaborate on that here in just a little bit. I'm having multiple meetings with my communications consultant, Kelly McMahon, who has kind of been out of action for a while, but she's eager to get back into the swing of things. We had a meeting this morning. We have another one Thursday, and her job is going to be to review what we need and create all internal and external signage needs. That's going to be a major piece of reentry. So for next week, I want to release a notice that MRH staff will return to offices, the 12-month staff, I mean. On July 13th, we will emphasize all the strict precautions that we have, including daily self-screening. That's going to be a requirement for anybody who enters a building. Next week, I want to develop the messages for families, which explains the tiered response system and how that works, how it fits into the course of the pandemic and how it kind of dictates what reentry looks like. Then I want to release the tiered response explanation in the week of the 13th. That'll be the week that we also begin coordinating timing of our reentry plans with other regional school districts, and that comes out on the 20th, Monday the 20th. On the topic of the lunch and listen community meetings with the board, I believe we need to get together and decide who's available for the next one. Like to do it early to mid next week. Then of course host it next week and then plan for the next one, which I think should be in the week of July 20th. On Proposition E, we are also, at the same time we're working on the equity piece for the website, we're creating a new page. We've taken down the old one that said, here's why you should vote for Proposition E. And we're going to create a new one that has the timelines for designing and bidding and building and all that. And then next week we'll start populating the site. And I think it's important, very important actually, that we include, even though it's not completely Proposition E related, but include information about how we are utilizing our architectural partner, ITNR, in re-entry. They have a larger role than even I realized, but I had a conversation with our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and they've got a pretty serious role in helping us make sure that we're distancing socially and properly. And then on the subject of the departure of Dr. Hall, assuming that we approve the RFP for the executive search firm tonight, I'll be posting that socially tomorrow. Now, I said I wanted to elaborate on the athletics piece. So the Missouri State High School Athletic Association and local health authorities have all agreed that tomorrow, July 1, is the day when there can be some resumption of athletic activities. And I know many, many districts are taking advantage of that. We are not, only for the reason that our gymnasium is undergoing the scheduled summer maintenance, I guess, and it won't be available for activity until the 13th. But a week from tonight, Tuesday, there will be some cross-country activity, and that will involve use of the track. So right now, and in fact, just starting today, the coaches and the leaders of the activities began contacting their families directly with very, very specific parameters on everything from who you can toss a baseball to how many people can be in one half of the gym at one time, and how many instructors, protocols for wiping down equipment in the weight room. They've got it nailed down to the minutest detail. My communication that I want to send tomorrow will take a more high-level look at it. It'll explain that there are kind of two phases of this for easing into the athletic activities, one from July 1 to July 21st, and the other from 22nd to August 9th. It will have, again, high-level information about, what contact sports participants can do in terms of drills and practices, non-contact sport and activity engagement. And one of the key pieces of this is that activities like this are going to take place in what we call stable groups. So a stable group is, there won't be kids moving from one group activity to another at one time in one session. So if you're tossing a baseball to somebody, you're going to be tossing that baseball to that person for the rest of that day. So that should give you an idea of the kind of detail that we're dealing with. And also, some of you may know this, but we created a new email called schoolreentry@mrhschools.net for anybody who has questions about the athletic activity or just any part of reentry. I'm publicizing that pretty heavily. And I think that's what I have for you tonight. I would love to take questions.
And as you are talking, are you preparing presentations or information for families? I know that I've heard Roxana speak a couple of times to a variety of groups on the layering of protocols and this idea that we're stacking various mitigation measures. I know as the emails were going out today about athletics resuming, there were some comments coming into the board about concerns about masks. And, obviously that is a pretty visible and a pretty significant mitigation measure that, I think many community members obviously want to see. And so I think it's important that we indicate that, masks are obviously one part of this, but it's part of a bigger vision, a bigger plan too, both with this short-term stuff or, summer athletics engagement, as well as how we're thinking about the longer term as well. So
yes, we've had several conversations about emphasizing that in all of our messages. It's like you said, it's extremely important for families to understand why we reach conclusions about things and what the sources of our decision making are. So yes, absolutely, that'll be a piece of the communication.
If we were to open school tomorrow, what tier would we be opening into? Do we have what tier are we currently at? I have not internalized our strategy well enough yet, so I just wanted to get my head around where we are right now.
Wes, you're going to get some disagreement and argument about that. Some are going to say that we haven't left tier 1 yet. Others would say we're in tier 2. It's like, some people are now saying that we're not seeing a second wave, we're seeing a resurgence of the first wave in terms of these cases that are escalating in some states and cities. So I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer the question you just asked, but.
Well, I appreciate your answer. I guess what I'm also wondering too is, I still don't have a clear picture in my head what we're triggering our tier motives off of.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The best way to think of it, tier 1, in order for us to go back to tier 1, it's almost like pre-COVID, before spring break. That's really what that would look like. Or there's a vaccine and we're really moving away to this reality of where we are. So really, we're functioning in tier 2 right now. We're going into the school year trying to use, as Katie made reference to, multiple layers of risk controls to mitigate the spread. With the distancing and the masks, with the cohorts of students, all these different things that have been recommended in order to mitigate the spread. Tier 3 is when we're in remote learning mode. We did that already in the spring. So really, tier 1 is we're on our way out. Like, things are getting a whole lot better. It would not be as stringent in terms of the risk controls if you're in tier 1. So tier 2, there's still, there's data now, there's reports about the spread, however you want to interpret it, as Ed was talking about. But we do have to make sure we have extensive planning around mitigation control, risk controls.
Okay. I guess I'm not phrasing my question quite specifically enough. What specific things are going to determine whether we move forward to tier 1, which sounds like where we really want to be, or we have to fall back to a tier 3? What are our parameters for that decision making?
Well, and that is a very good question, but we're following like St. Louis County Health Department. Okay. To be specific, I wouldn't do it because I feel a certain kind of way. If they say we need to go back to remote learning, that's going to be the trigger. If it's something extreme or we're at a high risk, then we would then move to another tier. So I don't have it exactly. I think we have to really watch this and what's going on in our community, because what we could have here in Maplewood, Richmond Heights, they won't have it in Jefferson County. So it wouldn't be, and you all know that it would be different depending upon where this is happening in the region. So I can't tell you specifically, but we have a general idea on how we would navigate it, and we just have to see very closely at that moment in time what is the recommendation. And they're all different now, the health departments,
Okay, so
that's, sorry, go ahead, Wes.
Just because I want to sum it up in my brain, if I were to be asked the question by a constituent,
yes,
what are you gearing your decision-making process off of? The answer would be, we're going with St. Louis County Health Department.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's kind of where my question lies. So is the St. Louis County Health Department contacting us and saying, this is the tier that you're in?
No, because that's the language that I use to try and make sense of our planning so people would understand how we're planning. We're planning 3 different ways. But yet, when I've had conversations with the health department, these are the things that she made recommendation for us. If we were to have school, you need to have different risk controls in place. You need to have social distancing. You need to have face covering, you know, these different hygiene methods that you need to do. These are all the things that has been recommended to be in school. So that's what we have been told at this point in time.
Who, I guess the next question is, so Wes, correct me if I'm wrong about what you're asking, but how do we know then at some point where we're at and where we're going? So for example, if there's a higher number of spreading in this area, does that mean we've fallen back a tier? What are the identifying factors of that? Who is making that decision, or who is going to be reporting that decision so that we know, okay, this is where we're at?
Well, I would have, yeah, it's very clear to me. Just like how we were told to quarantine, or we were told to go to remote learning, those decisions, you know, there were recommendations that were told to the superintendents from the health department, and then the state made all those orders for stay at home. So it would be similar that we would have to activate into remote learning, for example, let's just say. Now, there may be cases or a case where we may have someone who has developed COVID, and then we have to do contact tracing. So there's that protocol that you have to take. Well, depending upon the spread, depending upon where it is, we may have to have a shutdown in a particular location or a particular building, but it may not be necessary to do district-wide. Okay, so depending upon what that protocol indicates, that is something temporary. So you would come back in that determined amount of time, like 2 weeks or what have you, to resume what it would be, let's say, in tier 2. So to go back to one of your other questions, how do you know when to leave? Well, again, they're telling us about the spread. They're letting us know, and they're working closely, that is the health department and other health professionals are in regular contact with the superintendents. And so we're getting regular guidance. So we have a direct line to what their recommendations are going to be for all of us. And we still talk to each other every week. And one of the most recent guidance, actually, Katie, I think you were a part of this conversation. And I have that attached to our agenda for tomorrow, so everyone will see the shoulds and the mays in terms of guidance coming from the superintendent's group, working with all of these health professionals and what we need to embed into our plans. So I'm going to rely on similar guidance that we received in order to go into remote learning, yet again for the rest of the school year, if we can shift one way or another. But what we're doing in order to have students in school, it's going to be tier 2. And we're going to stay in tier 2 until something shifts radically with community spread.
So if I could just put another plug in, Ed, thank you for that sort of outline on the communication side, which I think was thorough and well done. I'm also happy to hear that Kelly is coming back in to support you and, you know, continue to help with the execution on those things. I just want to make sure that the board has in its mindset and leadership thinks about, you know, extra spending as it relates to communication, particularly as it relates to what we've been kind of kicking around and talking about, these sort of, you know, emergency incident reporting and that kind of stuff that might require us to move tiers or shift decision-making on the fly, which is, you know, it's a lot. This is a big ship to sort of navigate and to turn quickly on. I think, you know, Ed's doing a very great job of just staying on top of all of the different fundamental things, but just the speed at which this sort of starts to get out there, and the hypersensitivity, obviously for good reason, that our community has on this issue. I think I don't know what that looks like, and maybe next time we come together as a group, we can get kind of a summation of where we think our communication support could look, what it could look like, or what we might potentially have on reserve or on retainer or in place if these things should kick out. Just it's one of those areas I would be happy to continue to spend some additional time and money and resources on, just to make sure our community is well informed. I think they are. I think we're giving them everything that we can give them at this point. It's an awful uncertainty that we have to live with, and for the next few weeks as we kind of wait on some additional information. So, you know, I think we're doing what we can and getting out the information in a timely manner, but these things can turn on a dime, you know, and I just want to make sure that we're fully supported and capable of getting that out there.
Yeah, and I think also we can look at not only a human resource, but is there some technology that we could possibly use and investigate on? So I think,
sure.
you know, yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Karen, but I don't want to pull the trigger necessarily on that if we don't need to, but it would be good to identify those resources.
Yeah.
Maybe the costs, and have them ready to be turned on as needed.
Right. And it's just interesting. Some of the districts that are large and they have a lot of people, it'll be interesting to see some of the things that they're doing as well. And I'm just so grateful for Ed, because he works nonstop and he produces so much information, so much content, and I appreciate your support. We're so used to like figuring it out and making it happen. But yeah, I think we'll investigate also if there's apps or other things, because we already have our call system that we use, and we also have to put that in the hat for consideration. So yeah, Ed and I, we've started talking about that and thinking about Kelly maybe taking on one project in addition to, you know, to all this long list of things that we're working on.
All right.
Thanks.
I was going to move on. Francis, did you have anything else there? Okay.
No, just thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And again, it was, I know I sent a quick email to the board, really overwhelmed by the turnout of parents on the lunch and listen last week. I think it was right around 50 folks participated, and once the questions started in the chat box, they kept flowing for nearly the whole hour we were on the call, and helped field questions, and to Ed for being there. I know we have memorialized that in a recording, and have provided the questions in the chat, those that we were not yet able to answer, being shared with administration, as well as just the general kind of where people are wondering things right now was good to get a sense of. It looks like maybe we'll schedule next week a lunch and listen for over the lunch hour on Wednesday, the July 8th. And I know Nikki and Brandy have both raised their hands that they're available. I think I would be totally open to additional board members. And I think with more than a week's notice, we can actually post that listening session if we need to, should we have quorum. So just putting that out there.
Can I also put something out
Go ahead,
there?
Nikki.
Thank you. So so during our first lunch and listen, we had some parents that had questions about SSD. And I believe we had talked about the possibility of having a lunch and listen that was going to focus on SSD. And I reached out to Vince, and he said that he thought that would be a good idea. So would it be possible that this next one is kind of, there's a strong focus on SSD coming up? I guess that would be if Vince and Mr. Gleason are available.
Can I jump in on that?
Sure, please.
I had a talk on the Friday after the last session that we had with Ben, and I offered my support in setting up a session for SSD families. And he was going to talk with his superintendent about that. And we haven't spoken since, but he was very eager to explore that notion. And then he was also going to reach out directly to some of the people who participated in that lunch and listen, who I think weren't fully satisfied with some of the communication coming from SSD. But I'm with you, Ms. Knapper. I think that we ought to maybe have Ben, if he's available and if it's appropriate, have him available on this July 8th call. So I will approach him about his involvement.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
All right, great. Moving on to action items then. We've got quite a few things here. So we'll take it a little bit slow, but a motion on our plan for reentry with First Friends program.
Move to approve the suspension of First Friends program for school year 2020-2021.
Second.
Thank you, Nikki and Brandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we'll begin that communication here fairly quickly. A motion on the warrant list.
I move to approve the final warrant list as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Wes and Ralph. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Motion on the FY20 budget amendment.
I move to approve the fiscal year 20 budget amendments as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Wes and Brandy. All those in favor say
Aye.
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 aye. Aye. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. A motion on the FY21 budget.
I move to approve the fiscal year 21 budget as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Brandy. All those in favor say aye. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Food bids as presented last week. A motion on that.
Move to approve the food bids for school year 2020-2021 as presented.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Ralph. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. All right. Motion on the coffee infrastructure projects.
Move to approve the recommended facilities and infrastructure projects for fiscal year 2021 as presented.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Wes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? A motion on the RFP for an administrative search firm.
Second.
Thank you. I just want to say before we vote on it,
I move to approve the RFP.
I'll go ahead and second.
I didn't. I think we're having technical difficulties.
yes, my internet is very spotty tonight. So we have a motion and a second on the administrative search firm.
Yeah,
I got to say before we vote on it that Chris Holzer has helped to transition it to a virtual RFP in the vein of how some other RFPs have been released through the district. So you will see some slight changes to what we've previously reviewed, but it will be a virtual opening and a virtual accepting of proposals. So just calling attention to that since we didn't discuss it in detail tonight. So with that information, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And certifying the election results.
I move to accept the official certification of the 2020 general municipal election results as presented.
Then,
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. A motion to go into executive session.
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 10.021, subsections 2, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on June 30th, 2020 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, real estate matters.
I second.
Thank you, Brandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we will recess to executive session. Thanks, everybody.
So before everyone jumps off, I think one of the problems we've been having, I set the links up for executive session a bit too early and perhaps they've expired. So if that happens to be the case on this one, just watch your email. In the next couple of minutes, I'll get you a brand new link set out and we can all join.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.